It looks a little different from this one.
I would like to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. Please continue to eat, but we want to try to stay on schedule as much as possible. And we've allotted 2 hours for this movie. So you know where I come for this meeting. So we want to try to stay on schedule as much as possible. We will be recording the meeting tonight. It's not being broadcast, but when you talk, just make sure the green light on your microphone is turned on. Most of them are probably turned off, so you just need to press that button when you get ready to talk so that they can pick it up on the recording. We appreciate everybody taking their time to be here tonight. This is not something that we get an opportunity to do very often. I think it's probably been 4 or more years since the two boards have met jointly, and we appreciate the opportunity to do this. We try to, we very, very much appreciate the communication that goes on between the two staffs on a regular basis. We have communication that goes on with our chair and vice chair meetings, which we try to go back and share with the other board members. Which sometimes we do a good job on that, sometimes maybe not as good as we should. But we appreciate this opportunity for all of us to sit down at the table together and talk about our plans going forward so that hopefully at the end of the evening, hopefully we can all be on the same page of the direction that we're headed, but more importantly, everybody understands the facts of the resources that the county has to work with and the projects that the school system desires. And it's just a good opportunity for us, hopefully, to have a good exchange back and forth so that we can cooperatively work through the issues that we face in the coming years. And we'd like to start off just with a quick introduction around the table. So I think everybody knows everybody, but there may be a few exceptions, and I'll start. I'm Steve Morris, Chairman of the County Commissioners, and pass it to Commissioner Honeycutt.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Morris?
Yes.
I'm over here. I need to call our board to order because we do have an action item.
Please
at
go
the end
right
of the
ahead.
agenda. So I'd like to call to order the Board of Education for the Monday, April 23rd, 2018, Cabarrus County Board of Education joint meeting with the commissioners. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
So Mr. Harrison and Mr. Walter. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, sir.
I will follow your good example and call the meeting of the Board of Commissioners to order as well, and entertain a motion to approve the agenda that's before us tonight.
So moved.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion passes. And now we will proceed with our introductions.
I'm Diane Honeycutt, Vice Chair of the County Commissioners.
Mike Downs, County Manager. And just real quick, as you're going around, make sure you hit your button as you speak because we're recording the sound on this.
I'm Jim Router, Director of Operations.
Lynn Romer, Deputy Superintendent.
Robert Kirk, Board Member.
Kristen Jones, Budget Manager.
David Harrison, Board Member.
Carolyn Carpenter, Vice Chair.
Cindy Furtenbaugh, Board Chair.
Chris Louder, Superintendent, Cabarrus County Schools.
Kelly Klutz, CFO.
Rob Walter, Board Member.
Lynn Shue, County Commissioner. Barry Shoemaker. Barry Shoemaker. There you go. Barry Shoemaker, Board Member.
Kyle Billifer, Area Manager of Operations with Cabarrus County.
Jonathan Marshall, Deputy County Manager.
Blake Kiger, County Commissioner.
Susan Farrington, County Finance Department Director.
Pam Dubois, Senior Deputy County Manager.
Liz Poole. It's okay. That's okay.
Okay. And at the back table, back there, just, great. And we're happy to have some guests with us tonight as well. So at this time, I'm going to pass the microphone to County Manager Mike Downs, according to our agenda.
Yeah, good evening. I just want to, again, as Chairman Morris, welcome everybody, and just sort of set some ground rules. You can just leave it. It'll pick up. What we're looking at, we got an agenda here, and at the end of the agenda, you see that you guys, the Board of Education, have a few issues that they need to vote on tonight, so that'll be at the end. We got we've got a pretty jam-packed agenda here, so we want to try to keep it in the 2 hours, so don't think that I'm rude, but I'm going to be the one responsible to keep this thing moving as much as possible. But there's a lot of interesting things, and I know this is going to spur some conversation. So speak freely, but know that if it gets drawn out too long, we will push you along. So what we want to do is, typically at this time of year, at the end of May, both school systems and others come in and talk to the board, sort of getting towards past the middle point of the budget process, but sort of moving towards the end. But we wanted to make sure that we had the conversation ahead of time, just simply to give the Board of Education and staff a little update on where we are at this point in time in the budget preparation, but then also our understanding of the school's needs in 5- and 10-year capital plans, and our understanding of revenues and funding of these projects over the next 5 to 10 years. We want to make sure that we can try to somewhat get on the same page. And sometimes there may be some disagreement, but that's okay. But it's all going to be trying to put this big puzzle together and make everybody, and make it work. Meet the needs of the schools, meet the needs of the county, because not only do the schools have capital needs, the county's got a lot of capital needs. And so we want to make sure that we can address both in a timely manner. And in the end, make sure we can do it in a reasonable way and the least expensive way that we can, or responsible way. So with that, we'll call on the first group, and that would be Dr. Louder and Tim Louder to give the group an update on the 5-year capital improvement plan, and then just a 2 or 3 minute on the next 5 years as well. So.
Okay, and if we could, we just want to echo what Mr. Morris said about how much we appreciate the communication from the county, our budget process, how much we appreciate the county truly kind of reaching out and participating in that process. I know Ms. Honeycutt was at some of the meetings, Ms. Jones was at all of our meetings. Again, the effort to try to make sure that we work together and for you guys to truly have an understanding of our budget needs, certainly we very much appreciate it. It certainly helps. So at this time, I think we requested just to do a brief overview of the 5- and 10-year plan. I'll turn that over to Mr. Tim Louder. We tried to do that in just 2 or 3 slides.
We caught you, Terry.
Okay.
That's just a disclaimer, obviously. We don't have that every time. I like to make sure everybody remembers that. All right. Next one, please. Ongoing projects. The Royal Oaks project is very near completion. Obviously, the PLC has broke ground. They'll pour the slab on that next Monday. That's looking really well on schedule as well. Cabarrus High School construction is a little bit behind schedule due to the weather, but and of course the weather hurt us today. We were supposed to set concrete panels, but it's underway. Southwest Elementary School for growth is hopefully the board will award that contract tonight, and I'll issue notice to proceed for tomorrow morning. That number has been upped obviously to 36 because of the additional $4 million we asked for just recently. Our current timeline for, as you see, 3 projects there under construction as we speak. We're looking at purchasing land for a middle school and maybe 2 high schools, depending on how much forward money will go. Obviously, one for the current, next high school, but also maybe an opportunity to land bank for the 3rd high school. So that's one of our purchase priorities right now. trying to do something with the land for downtown elementary school, either if we go on an existing site and look at the future downtown elementary school, which may be an alternate site if we do cultural web off-site. The renovating and converting existing facilities, I was concerned about that. The reason it starts in 2019, because some of those funds are for repurposing Beverly Hills, or once that school is vacated, and then we'll be repurposing R. Brown McAllister. Then the bulk of it, though, the $31 million is for after Northwest Cabarrus High School, or New Northwest High School is built, converting the other high school to a middle school in the northwest part of the world. And then next we have is Downtown Elementary School number 1. Of course, that's R. Brown McAllister. And then Downtown Elementary School number 2, which would be Coulter and Webb. Those are scheduled for 2-year increments apart. The new high school for growth in the Northwest Cabarrus, as I said earlier, that would be hopefully open in 2022 with a conversion of that to a middle school following the year afterward. Then J.M. Robinson Area Feeder Middle School, we're currently looking for land. May have zeroed in on at least a couple opportunities for that one. That was hoping up in 2022 as well, because it got pushed back 2 years because we opened up J.N. Freeze for pushing it back. And then, of course, it's got some capital projects, which are some of the stadium repairs and that sort of thing. The Fire Academy at Concord was the other one to be funded over a 4-year period here. Okay. Next 6 to 10 years, they basically just got additional high school on tap for growth. Obviously, repurposing some of the existing facilities once some of those have been abandoned and something like Mary Frances Wall and that sort of thing. And then, of course, adding an auditorium and performing arts at Harris Road. And then a new middle school for growth would go with a new high school that would be built hopefully by 2024. And then 2 elementary schools for growth somewhere during that period of time. We feel like we've got that much growth. Okay? That's all the slides I have. That's just an overview. That's just a summary of recommendations, but I just made those, so you can click them if you want.
Since we don't have that document, should we ask questions as we go, or do we want to wait till he's done? How do we want to do that, Mr. Chairman?
Whatever is convenient for the presenter. So, Mr.
I'll
Louder?
be more than happy to answer any questions anytime, so.
Okay. I think it's probably a pretty small item, but I don't remember seeing driveway improvement at Cox Mill. Just define that, because I don't remember that. Did I see that correctly?
The next slide up, please, right there. The capital improvements, the drive C and make Cox Mill High School. They asked us to put that in there a few years back. We're looking at the stadium and then the Fire Academy, and then we're looking to try to buy a parcel of land that will allow us to have a back drive into Cox Mill High School because of the traffic situation out there. On the student parking lot side, it would come back out to the road. The land's very expensive. We just happen to see the land is up for sale, but it's probably more expensive than we can afford to be able to do that for a driveway. But that was one of our wants anyway.
But comes out to Cox Mill Road. I'm trying to
Yes, it
envision
would come
what's
out to Cox
behind the
Mill
school.
Road.
That's empty.
It would go from the student parking lot on the far west, east side of
Yeah.
campus and go north
Okay.
onto Cox Mill Road.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Can you go back one more slide? So the new Southwest Elementary School there says 26 and 36 million, and if you go to the next slide, well, yeah, 25 and 32. That's the same school we're talking about?
Yes, ma'am, that was 32. It was 32 million until we added the $4 million to it recently.
For the steel.
Yes, ma'am.
So really, that should say 36 now.
36, yes, ma'am. I
Okay.
didn't go back and change that.
Well, that's fine. I was
That
just
was-
trying to make sure I was
That
on
was the
right
way it
track.
was approved as the board. That's why I changed it on the earlier
Okay.
slide.
I got a question, Tim. Back on that slide there, you've got, are these in order? They are in order,
Oh,
timeline,
it's
right?
got timeline pretty close, yes, sir.
Okay, because it's the renovate existing facilities, what are those facilities?
Well, the first one on that list is to renovate and repurpose our Beverly Hills. Okay.
Okay.
The second one on that would be once the downtown elementary school number 1 is built, replacing R. Brown McAllister, that would repurpose R. Brown McAllister. But the third and the bulk of that money is for converting existing Northwest High School to Northwest Middle School once we build a high school, which is 24, 4 or 5 years down the road. But we just put all those projects in one. We can break those up into individual. Kelly and I talked about that earlier today. We could break those up into individual, showing you the 5 and the 5 and the 31. if you were to do that. That way it'd be more on the year actual rather than just having a longer time frame there.
Okay, and then one other question. The new high school, I know we had talked before about the North Cabarrus, is that a replacement with additional seats? Or is
Yes.
that a whole new school?
Well, we talked about that a little bit earlier, I think, when we made a presentation to you. Right now, we feel like there's growth both in northwest part of the county and, of course, around the central southern part of the county, but not enough growth in both areas to support a whole new 1,600-plus student school. So our thoughts were there to build a new replacement school for Northwest Cabarrus High School and expand it to 1,800. And that way we allow the extra seats once we do our redistricting, and that it would allow us about 600 seats then for expansion in that northwest area, which we think we could fill within the first 5 years. If we build a brand-new school, but it'd probably take more than 5 or 6 years to get 1,600 new high school kids in that district. That was the purpose of that.
So the Northwest Cabarrus High School Stadium, is that to refurbish for the middle school, to be used by the middle school?
Well, it can
or
still
is
be
it a-
used by the middle school or the high school until that was built.
Okay, all right,
It's the biggest problem we have there, we got some structural issues with the concrete.
right.
You've seen those.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And there's a spring head underneath it that we need to accommodate to make sure that structurally stays well. And of course, Concord High School Stadium is same vintage, same time frame, got the spalling concrete, that sort of thing needs to be refurbished as well.
Yeah, I guess my question was really gonna be, I guess it's gonna depend on where the new high school goes, whether or not they continue to share the stadium,
Yes, sir.
or whether it's
Yes,
a
sir.
need for a second.
We were in hopes of being able to acquire a land adjacent to the high school and then let them continue to use the stadium, which would make it cheaper for us to build it. But we may not be able to do that. So if that's the case, we'd have to build it off-site, and the refurbished stadium would just be used for the middle school.
Okay.
Tim, I have a question, Tim.
Yes, sir.
There was a time within the last several years that there was talk from the school board about Central Cabarrus High School, replacing that school. That was the thought at one time. And then the thought came up, well, we need those seats. So we'll have to build another high school, which is where the new high school came into play now.
Yes, sir.
Now, how did Central Cabarrus go from in that area, keeping in mind that Northwest and Central were built in the same time frame? What took the precedence for Northwest to come on the scene when Central was there?
The biggest reason for that, both of them need replacement, and no doubt, both of them are about the same condition. The biggest issue we had a lot of growth around Central 3, 4, 5 years ago, heavy growth. That growth has seemed to slow just a little. And our demographics are saying that the bulk of our growth and the mass growth is going to occur in that northwest area, so therefore we'd be way behind the curve if we don't do something there. So we feel like we can manage Central Cabarrus at its current size with redistricting to the new high school and maybe even some to Mount Pleasant to allow us to accommodate a 4-year delay in putting that one behind the Northwest and Northwest move forward, just because our demographers told us that basically the growth we could expect is in the Northwest area.
And I'd like to add to Mr. Shu that I believe we have 6 to 12 months to see where the school capacity changes, to determine which one is in more dire need. So, and if you followed, the city of Kannapolis has recently approved a lot of housing growth up the Kannapolis Parkway area across 3, and those students come to Northwest Cabarrus High School. So,
When do you anticipate the redistricting plan that's being worked on now? When will they have that complete that will show you, give you a better picture of who needs to go where and all that?
We will begin that process 1st of May with hopes of following a timeline that would have us ready for some board direction sometime around December, January, hopefully the latest of February. Ms. Furtenbaugh is directly involved, so she can probably answer a little better.
yeah, we're hoping that we'll have the first plan in November. And depending on how comfortable the board is with that decision, I've been fortunate to talk to one of the partners in this study twice now, and have been extremely impressed with how much they know about the county already. But that's their business, to learn your area fast and study the numbers. And I learned things in a conversation yesterday that I didn't know about this county after 32 years. So it was quite interesting, and I was pleased with how informed they are. So I'm hoping it's going to accelerate, and we will be able to get to a decision perhaps in November.
Tim mentioned school size on the high school. This may be more of a question for the board and not necessarily Tim. You're gonna build whatever they tell you to build, that's what you're gonna build. But, so size-wise, are all of those projects based on what we would historically consider what, in Cabarrus County, at least in recent history, elementary schools of 800, middle schools of 1,000, and then 14, 15, or are those different than that?
I'll let the others address it, but I believe for the two downtown elementary schools, because both of limitations on land size and the fact that there's not a lot of room for growth, those may end up at 650. But the other schools will go, Tim, you said 1,600 for the high school, 16 to 18?
Yes, ma'am. We basically built our elementary schools that are in the growth areas for 940. Okay, the Southwest is 940, so that's at 900, 940 is our elementary. Yes, sir. And then about 1,200 for the middle school. And we'd like to have the high schools at 1,600. However, the new high school we're building right now is for 1,800 to accommodate that. And that's why we looked at one in Northwest, because we needed the extra seat capacity there. If we were going to replace it, right now it's for 1,300. We would add it to 1,800, allow 500 more seats at that one at 1,800 versus what we'd like to have is that 1,600, I think. I think has pretty strong feelings on that 1,600, but we try
Yeah,
to do
I think we're comfortable, 1,800 for a lot of reasons has worked, and in these situations with replacement, we wouldn't really want to build schools much bigger than 1,800, but are we comfortable with 1,800? I think the answer to that is yes.
And
Or that was a conversation at the retreat, size. I just didn't know if that, you had any further, so.
And Blake, you'll remember from your previous service on our board, that the core capacity in the school, the gyms, the cafeteria, the media center, that's more expensive. And so you lessen your cost literally per square foot on those items, the more students you have in the classrooms, which are the least expensive part of the school to build. The other thing is the state also allocates things like assistant principals based on certain student ADM. So in order to help ourselves and to relieve the county of providing as many of those positions, not that we still need y'all, but as we reach those thresholds in individual schools, we now get an allocation from the state for the position.
I mean, really, there's a lot of different factors, some good, some bad. It's a lot to take. I just wondered if you guys had been having those conversations, so.
I'm going to give some general comments, and if you have a specific question, Barry.
I wanted to add one thing. The 10-year plan, as you can see, does not talk about the deferred maintenance, which is something we address every year on our budget. And you've got to keep in mind that there is this other issue that keeps plaguing us, and that is the deferred maintenance. And we do address that every year in our budget, but I want you to kind of get an overall understanding of where we are on deferred maintenance. And right now, we're about $83 million behind when you count all of our projects in not counting these capital projects. We've asked for about $5.5 million to cover the 35 items that we have that are 500,000 or 25, 500,000 or less. But that doesn't cover the 18 million, because there's $18 million worth of projects that are under $500,000. And then there's another $43 million worth of projects that are in excess of 500,000. Every year we defer, that's just a year more that we get behind. And I know this board's very well aware of it, but I just want to keep that on the radar. As we begin to think about our decisions for the future, we have to keep that in mind, because it's not getting easier for us to maintain our schools, and the parents are beginning to understand that their structures are suffering. And so that is a thing that I wanted to make sure that you guys heard, because it's not embedded in this 192 million you see in years 6 to 10. This deferred maintenance keeps increasing, and I was just talking about year one. So the 83 million that I talk about in year one is just the beginning of what the deferred maintenance looks like over the next 10 years. So we do have that issue that's not being talked about here. So, thank you.
Barry, do you remember, you and I we met with Charlotte and Mecklenburg, and their maintenance staff, I mean, I don't know, just
Yeah.
5 or 6, 8 people.
Phil Berman.
Yeah, Phil, that's right. They had a percentage. What was, do you remember what the number was of,
Well, they wouldn't articulate specifically the percentage, but the white papers that I've been reading and everything are around 2 to 3% versus the asset value. So if you looked at asset value of what you have, you should be each year pumping in about 2% for the asset value. And we're about 1.2 billion when you consider the Kannapolis City Schools plus our schools. And so, you know, when you begin to add those numbers up, then that 2% becomes $24 million a year annual maintenance budget, and we're sitting at, what, 8 million, is that what it is? About 8 million a year for us. I'm not saying we need to get there. We've always tried to mark a path to how to get to that level and how to begin to deal with deferred maintenance, but, you know, it's a long haul to get to where you can really begin to take care of your buildings, because we didn't start out that way.
right? Well, that's my recollection. It was somewhere in the 2% range, and it's a staggering number when you start looking at it in those terms.
All right, that actually is a great segue. I'm not going to talk about some of the deferred maintenance and maintenance projects we have. What I want to talk about are some of the other larger CIP projects that we have. And one of those, whether it's popular or not, that is the largest. Actually, our CIP is behind, it's tab E. I'm just going to hit on some of these. The largest one of those is the courthouse. We are in need of a new courthouse. That's another one of our responsibilities. We actually have hired an architect, and we'll be doing the design of that, but then later Susan will go through what the costs are anticipated to be for that and how that affects our debt service. But in addition to that, we also are in need of an EMS headquarters. They're currently operating out of what was a renovated house at Station 1 with no training room and only as many offices as they currently have, and it does not match the model that we'll need to put in place to keep up with EMS needs as we move into the future, particularly with our population growth. We're still looking for land to build a public safety training center, which we would phase in. We are also looking for an area for a warehouse to be built that would support both the county and the schools. But along with that, our fleet continues to grow, and we're going to need to replace our fleet maintenance facility. Those things that I would say are not mandatory, but are part of our services, and we have plans in place to expand them or to keep them maintained, are libraries, senior center, and parks. Every one of those has been pushed back on our CIP. So as you look at that CIP that's in there, a lot of those were, some cases, in fiscal year 17, and they've pushed all the way to 20 at this point or beyond. So again, if you have specific questions about any of these projects, we'd be glad to answer them.
Public safety facility, you can already push 3 or 4 years already, and it's still 5 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. So any question, Kyle, you got anything to add?
No, unless anybody has any specific project questions, but, you know, we're in the same boat as you all, as you push these things out. Some of these descriptions, we're only allowed a certain amount of characters to describe them, but you've got a lot that are dealing with ADA compliance, and you've also got a lot of issues in some of those parks that are major infrastructure issues. I mean, some of our parks are 35-plus years old, and we're just consistently Band-Aiding, trying to keep them open to the public. And at a certain point with some of these infrastructure issues, you know, we might have a safety issue, or we might lose a park for a month to go down. So we've got to start looking at some of this infrastructure inside these parks, these non-mandatory issues, and making decisions, because we just keep pushing them off. And I understand we're all in the same boat, just letting you know.
Well, we wanted to talk about that too, because while and that's why we wanted to present both the school's needs and both the county's needs, because we just the last several years trying to make those accommodations and trying to keep you on track. We've pushed a lot of our projects back. And again, as we just said, one of them's already 5 years back, and it's not proposed for another 3 years. So we're trying to find, that's why this discussion is very important, so that we can find a balance somewhere. And we have proposed a couple of library expansions and additional phases to parks. Well, actually, our Veterans Park has probably got 5 more phases left that we've been pushing out for several years now. So we want to make sure, because each one of those have their own special group or a special interest group that rely on parks and rely on libraries. And when they're not being built or enlarged, or the inventory of books is kept current, then we start to hear that as well. So we're trying to make sure that, okay, we have issues, we have needs, you have needs, and we're starting to look at the money and how far can we stretch it? And then when we get to the point where we can't stretch any further, what's the next step? And that we all agree that that's the best way to move forward. So, move right into our 5-year plan. Kristen is going to talk to you a little bit about where we are now. Again, remember, as we tell everybody every year, just as your 5- and 10-year capital improvement plan is a plan, this is a plan. And typically, it's the current year is the only one that's definite, and the next 4 are planning. But it gives us a good guide so that we as staff can advise the board, and then also have the public see that what we've got planned out and the challenges as well. So we'll talk a little bit about this, and then, again, this is a plan. We are typically at this time in the process, we're typically at this place. In fact, we're a little bit farther off this year than we have been, but we're trying to make it work. And we're looking at all of our services. We go back and look at our budgets from zero-based all the way back and start, is the program working? If it's not working, why? And if we can make changes, then we'll continue. And if it's one that's not working, then we won't fund it anymore, and we'll move that funding somewhere else that needs it more. So,
Mike, I wanted to make a comment just for people to know, to continue on with what Jonathan talked about, the courthouse on our CIP. The building itself is in fairly good condition to be as old as it is, which is the same with a lot of the schools. And whenever this new courthouse that we're talking about comes along, that part's going to be incorporated with it. But the problem that we're having is, and I don't have the correct numbers now, how many cases we're doing over there a year, but just a couple of years ago, they were doing 55,000 court cases a year. And it's got to the point where that, just like schools, the state funds teachers. Well, the state also funds its judges and staff for the courthouse. And our position there is to keep the courthouse and maintain it just like it is for schools. But the problem is that we don't have room. I mean, we've remodeled, and we've took every little crook and nanny that can be used for office space. File cabinet space downstairs is converted to offices. I mean, they're just running over at the seams there. And I wanted to make those comments to you so you would have a better understanding. The county's not just going to jump off the leap, say, well, this courthouse has been built since 1970, 72, somewhere thereabouts, and we just all of a sudden decide we needed a new courthouse. That's not the case at all. The case is that we don't have room to conduct the judicial things that need to take place in this county the way it's structured now. But the old courthouse there will be utilized in the plans for the new courthouse. So it's not going to just be wrote off. It's going to be used in addition to the new courthouse. And if, Jonathan, you want to add to that, or anyone else can add to it. But I just wanted you to understand that whereas the schools have capacity needs and before the growth, well, that's the same issue with the courthouse.
To meet our space needs, we have to use the existing courthouse to meet our office needs. And as he said, we've been assigned a new judge, but with every judge, you also get clerks. And with clerks, you get probation officers, and it just keeps going down in an ever-widening pyramid. So we are running out of office space. What we'll need to do is build the new courthouse with courtrooms and support facilities for the judges primarily, but then we'll need to remodel the existing one to maximize the use of that for our clerk of courts and for all the other associated offices in there.
okay. Kristen?
So I'll just briefly go over the 5-year plan that everyone should have in front of them. And like Mike said, this is a working
Which tab?
document.
Which tab?
I'm not sure in their packets, it's the ledger size paper. Yeah, that might help.
First one.
I think it's, the first one. Yeah. So I'll just briefly kind of go over what this plan is saying and how we set it up, and feel free to stop me at any point if you have any questions. So you do see that we have a 2018 column, so that's to kind of give you reference as far as the county's budget. And we use this 5-year plan as a planning tool and document in order to, map out our current fiscal year, but also 4 years out. So it's kind of a long-range financial plan for the county. So again, that 2018 column just serves as a reference for what we budgeted for our different revenue categories and our expenditure areas. I will note, if you see the shading with different exhibits in parentheses, we do have supplemental information in your packets that will kind of outline the proposed school debt for FY19, which we're calling the LOBS 2018, and then any proposed school debt for future years, and one of our county projects, which is the courthouse project. So I will just briefly just kind of go over how the plan is set up, because it can be a little daunting when you're looking at it over a 5-year period. So the 2019 column, the highlighted column, is what we're focused on, the grayed out column, and that is what's proposed for currently in the county's budget. So you'll see that what's showing in the different columns as far as the revenues and expenditures are going is any increase or decrease year over year from the county's current budget to our proposed budget. So really some main points of highlight are in the expenditure areas. You see that we do highlight the school debt, the LOBS 2018, which I believe Susan will touch on briefly in a second, but it is showing you the principal and interest payment for 2019 and then all the future years out, which you're seeing either the increase or decrease in principal and interest for those projects. So the LOBS 2018 projects include a new elementary school, 20 mobile units, and HVAC units for Jay and Freeze and Mount Pleasant High School. And then we have it also separated out for RCCC, which is a land purchase in the Advanced Technology Center. And so if you look in the 2019 column, you can see for Cabarrus County Schools debt projects, the principal payment that is proposed to hit in 2019 is that $3,629,511 that you're seeing in that column right there. And then, of course, the debt service carries on in future years. Also, I do want to note how we do have school debt proposed, which Susan will touch on a further exhibit, I believe, in a few minutes, that kind of outlines proposed school debt, when the schools are set to open, and when the principal and interest payments would hit, then along with the courthouse debt, which we've already touched on that project. And we do also have an exhibit that goes over the current expense funding that is currently proposed for both school systems, Cabarrus County Schools and Kannapolis City Schools. So really the point of the 5-year plan is to serve as a planning tool. You're seeing revenues over expenses. So currently you are seeing a deficit, if you follow it all the way down at the very bottom, of $5.4 million. And so really it's a telling document because it's showing you how we are in FY19, but then also in future years as we take on more debt. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
When we first started this process about a month ago, that 5.4 million was 15.4 million. So we have already massaged that and moved things around, pushed things out. Some of the requested from departments, that wasn't approved. So we're moving on. So we're to this point. So we're going to continue to massage. We're still early in the process, but that's why we wanted to have these meetings, just to show you how the county has to work with the funds that we get in, and how do we allocate them to the important projects to keep things moving, both on the county side and the school side. So, any questions on the 5-year plan and how we create it? You see it. This is something you guys see every year. So, but we wanted to make sure you had an update as to where we are now and where we still have to get to over the next couple of months before the board is to the position that they feel comfortable passing the budget, so. Right, now we want to take these funds and show you what it's going to look like based on the school's proposed capital plan as well as the county's proposed capital needs. And what will it look like as we go out into the future? Turn your microphone on or get it close to you.
Exhibit B. This is your current debt. And as Kristen spoke earlier, your projects for Cabarrus County Schools, of course, we've been speaking all night about the elementary school, the mobile units, the HVAC systems, and then Rowan Cabarrus Community College with their Advanced Technology Center and the land purchase. So this Exhibit B actually shows you the principal and interest payments for FY19, because that's when the debt was began, all the way through 24. Just gave it for 5 years, and the change each year. I think a lot of people, the general public, maybe think that, when we build a school and, we build it and we pay for it and go on, but these schools we're paying for 20 years. So this debt is in addition to what we're already paying. So this is new debt on top of our existing debt service. So for example, if you want to go back to the 5-year plan for the debt for just the Cabarrus County School, the principal and interest together is $3.6 million, in addition to what we have to do for Rowan Cabarrus. And like we said, each year, the principal and interest, it's level principal and interest fluctuates a little bit. So you'll see on on the Exhibit B, where we have a negative $119,189 under FY20. That's because of the interest going down, so it can fluctuate. But that doesn't mean the payment goes away. That's just the decrease over the total expense. So that gets a little confusing on our 5-year plan. But anyway, so with that being said, we are still on track to issue debt on, we're going to go to the LGC on May 1st and hopefully be closing on May 16th for our debt. And all the proceeds will be available then at that time if everything goes well. Any questions on this current debt that we're proposing? Okay, in Exhibit C, I believe, mine are not, Exhibit C. So, the page flips the other way. Kelly and I worked together with getting a schedule of when construction to begin on the 2 proposed downtown elementary schools, a new high school and new middle school. So at the top of the exhibit, there's a column for construction to begin and when the school is supposed to open, the total needs. And at this point, I wanted to go back into, in the past years, we've been able to use a combination of pay-as-you-go for our architect and engineering and just borrow money for the construction. We're at that point, as you saw in our 5-year plan, we can't do that anymore. We have to borrow for the entire amount of the land, architect, engineering, the equipping, the construction, and everything as far as the school. So this scenario takes into fact that all the money will be borrowed. So, if we're in a better place, so be it, that'll be great. But right now, we can't project that. So what this does is it puts all the projects on there, and then the first debt payments would be in FY20. So with that being said, the only county project that we're going to be borrowing money for is the courthouse, and we had to do that in 3 phases. So the first part of the courthouse debt would come on in FY20, so that's to the tune of $1 million. And then the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school, borrowing it in stages also is $4.3 million. So that total debt service that we'll be adding on in FY20 is $5.3 million. That's on top of the debt that we just issued for FY19, which was $5 million. So that looks daunting, but then you look at 21 when the bulk of it starts to hit, and then we're going to go up to $19.5 million in debt service. So that just keeps accumulating. And then the next year is $28 million, just to meet the planned schedule for the courthouse and these 4 schools. This does not, as you'll drop on down at the end of the page, it does not take into consideration the renovating and converting existing facilities that we spoke about, the $41 million, moving the Northwest Middle to the Northwest High School and repurposing things like that. That does not, this plan does not take any of that into consideration. This is just debt service on the new facilities. So just looking at this, like I said, is very daunting to see that, in FY22, we're going to have an additional $28.7 million of debt service to meet this funding, the funding plan that's presented. I know that was fast, but any questions?
Yeah, Pam, you got anything to add?
Susan, when you were talking about the 5.3 million in 2020, and you said in 2021 it'd be 19.5, it's only an additional 14 million.
This is correct. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So she's just telling you that in 2020 it's 5.3 million, and then additional 14.2
You're right.
million, then additional 9.1 million.
Stand
But it
correct-
is
stand
cumulative
corrected.
28, but the new money is those numbers that
Yes.
are significantly being added. And the other portion, we've worked with Kelly on, is we've got the current expense when you open the new schools, and with the obligation with the high school and the elementary school, we're looking at an additional $3 million for opening those two schools. And our continuation funding is right around almost $5 million just to keep the current schools we have open, along with the share that we have to give to Kannapolis City Schools based on the ADM split that is shrinking. But that does make a difference. So that could be somewhere in the $7.2 million range, I think, in the 2021 year, if we look on the 5-year plan. 2020 year, I'm so sorry. Do that off the top of my head. But, and then I think you have a little bit of a lull in 22, and then it comes back in 23 when more schools open again. So we get the effect of the debt service, and then we get the effect of the current expense. And I think as staff, we've all agreed that we're fighting to get technology taken care of. We're fighting to keep teacher supplements up there and deferred maintenance.
And so it addresses deferred maintenance, or it doesn't?
It takes a small shot at deferred maintenance. We're looking at roughly 150,000, well, I don't know if it's really deferred maintenance, it's just money that's requested in the buildings fund. The last 2 years, we accumulated about $900,000 of reoccurring money, and been able to eat away at the 25,000 and less projects, and some of them above that, depending on how the budget goes. So.
But not the 83 million that Barry was talking about earlier.
So where we're at right now is we set up a CIP process that Cabarrus County Schools and Kannapolis City Schools and RCCC participate with us. And for Cabarrus County Schools, if the project's over $500,000, their projects go into it. If it's Kannapolis or RCCC, they're at our 100,000 level because you guys are much bigger. So what we funded now is we've covered everything from 25,000 and below, and we've got a process for $500,000 and above, but we got a gap from 25 to $500,000, and that's the focal point that we're trying to work on. But the 150,000 that we're looking at this year is just general maintenance money to keep up with the break fix type things, not anything in relationship to deferred maintenance. So the two of the HVAC systems that are on the debt are part of your deferred maintenance, but yet they exceed $500,000. But it was just an avenue to try to nip those two and take those into consideration. But that's kind of where our gap is right now, is in the deferred maintenance area. And then one other slight change we'll talk about a little bit later is stopping from funding technology when a new school opens in a lump sum and turning it into current expense on a reoccurring lease amount. So Kelly's worked with us on that to get that converted, but we just couldn't get this fixed in time for this meeting, but we're going to transition into that. So an example of that would be the high school is going to need $1 million for technology, but we'll put in $250,000 for reoccurring, and then when 4 years comes around, yay, you have money to continue those leases and not have to have a surprise. So we're trying to come up with methodology to get that fixed, and we're getting there. So I think that's our last gap. So we're trying to stop any further bleeding, but we've got to go back and catch all the other stuff that we haven't done. But we've progressed towards the future of not making things occur again. So that's positive. We just now got to go back and fix the old holes, if that makes sense to everyone.
The deferred maintenance list, are there any new schools in that? And is there any deferred maintenance projects that would take place if, in a school that's going to be replaced in the next 2 years or 1 year?
I'll let Mr. I'll let Mr.
We don't have a
Louder
list
answer
here.
that question. He would be the most,
Yeah. We have, again, considering where we're going with the replacement schools, have pushed off as much deferred maintenance as possible in any of those facilities that would be replaced. Only just doing basically repair maintenance on them without looking at anything, replacement services, and to do that. Now, we did that for Central Cabarrus for about 4 years. If we had to do it for 4 more years, we pretty much are gonna have to do some deferred maintenance at Central, even though we're, 6 to 8 years out, because we have pushed that one to the point where we're going to have to replace some things there. That's all there's to it. But,
So I'd like to add that the list, the $25,000 to $500,000 list, just by nature of the value of the project, you're not going to find that many of the big remodels or new construction on that list at all. Anything that did fall within that category, $25,000 to $500,000, they did exactly as Mr. Louder said. We pushed it out into future years, knowing that we had this plan. So the things that would be in that list would be minimal, and they would be pushed out to future years.
All right. Just, there are some deferred maintenance or replacements. Those HVAC units are,
Yes, they are but they were above the $500,000 value. That's what I was
So,
indicating. They're
right.
not in that small category.
right. But
And
over the 150 you're talking about, you're talking 8 million?
I
Are they
don't
$4
really know
million
what that
a
number
piece?
is.
They're $4 million apiece, the HVAC?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So there's $8 million that we are proposing for next year as well, to go towards that.
And Mrs. Klutz or Mr. Louder, do we have a ballpark rate of inflation right now for construction, inflation? Not necessarily specifically to school construction, but are we factoring in some price spikes that we're seeing for the short term into these figures?
at this current year budget, we basically are using dollars that we have today, and 5 years down the road, we have not put an escalator on it. One, with the volatile market, I'm not sure we could. But we have looked at, some of the school construction requests, trying to push it forward, 3 to 5% per year, but as we saw this past year, we probably saw a 20% spike in 1 year, so hopefully that don't continue. If this would be in a pretty bad spot, but hopefully that will continue on with 3 to 5% average, but that's been historical, not necessarily what's in the future for right now. The economy grows, obviously that goes up.
And if you look at your Exhibit D in your packet, that's the school request is what it looks like today, where we have the, we're trying to meet the 8% supplement. We got the $150,000 in there for the building and grounds, for the buildings, maintenance money, one building tech, and then $200,000 for technology. Kristen pointed out to me that the schedule was in here, I forgot, so I just wanted to let you know that it was in here.
Ma'am, can you just update us one more time? Above the capital, the debt service it's going on, what does it cost to open up the new high school?
To open up the new high school, we have $409,000 in this year's, in 19's budget to start it off. And does the $2 million add to that? So it'd be a total 2.5. I just wanted to make sure I didn't know whether it was included in the 2 million or above and beyond the 2 million. So $2.5 million for the high school and $1 million for the elementary school.
That recurs from now forever.
Forever.
Ms. Klutz, you got something to add to this group here? Didn't know if you had some. No? Okay. Great, so that's the end of the presentation. Now it's more conversation, and we see where we are from the county as far as we are preparing next year's budget. We know our needs, we know your needs, and as you can see, at this point, we're still at a deficit, and we're still working towards that to make it go away, but it's getting harder and harder. Getting harder and harder. We've maintained the tax rate for 7 years now, I think it is. But the growth hasn't stopped. We're still moving, and we need to look at be more creative, whether it's additional funding, whether it's working on schedules to try to match the construction or the need to the ability to pay. If we spread them out and reduce the impact of having these large numbers all at one time. So it'd be nice just to have a little bit of conversation and some feelings or some opinions back and forth. You guys have needs. Again, we have needs, and the public has expectations. So where do we meet in this so that we're all making a positive movement forward, but we're also being somewhat responsible as we move along? I know you have opinions. Anyone care to be the first one out of the block, or?
I'll be the first one out of the block. Mine is short and sweet and simple because I sat right over there and talked about it a long time in what seems like a previous lifetime. If you look at the chart that Susan was talking about, the school debt over time, the only thing that really, what it really boils down to, and I mean, there's a lot of things, but one of the big things is we have to do it on our side, but you guys on your side, you got to do every single thing you can possibly do to keep the cost down. I mean, you have to, because it's those numbers are pretty staggering. You know, we've got to build these schools, and so I know when I was first came on the board, the school board, the previous board had just finished doing the construction standards. So we had a document that took into account information from the construction industry, board experience, to try to set a standard to be able to give the architect to then say, listen, this is what we want to build here in our county. And so that's a key document. The other one is, and this was finalized even after I got there, that Land Design did, which was the land use guidelines that we adopted with the county. Carolyn, you were on that with me and some county staff, where we took information from DPI and said, okay, here's what they recommend, here's what traditionally we do in Cabarrus County, here's how we're going to merge the two together so that we could at least on both sides have a plan of how we're trying to move forward to pick sites and do whatever. So, obviously those things are hopefully still in play, and you've still got them and still use them. I know at the retreat, I'd asked about the construction standards subcommittee, and that's kind of a different thing, but it's sort of the same of having at least Tim some help of trying to put all this stuff together, because he can't do it by himself. But the overreaching goal of all of that is to make sure that, we keep the cost down as much as possible. So that's my little soapbox. And the only reason I bring that up is because I sat right there and said, hey, I know we have an obligation to the taxpayer to keep the cost down. So it's that's sort of, it's been there a long time. We're going to have to get there some way, shape, or form. But those two documents, I hope you've still got, and I hope you're still using. I think you and I sat on that committee where we were adopting the land use. I know Carolyn was. I think maybe you did that with us as well, but no, okay. But, so anyway, Mike, that's just my little quick soapbox, but to me, that's a very important piece of the puzzle, especially when you sit and look at the numbers over time.
So I guess the question would be, are those things still in place that he's talking about?
Yes, sir. We have our construction standards manual that tells us, what size of classrooms, what size of rooms, what were our preferred materials, that sort of thing. All goes in. We hand it all to the architect at the very beginning of the job, so we have it discussion. During the programming stages, we understand what's needed at each school, each grade level, based upon that construction standards manual. It's pretty thorough. It's a good manual. We had to update a couple things because sometimes the materials that we requested have since been replaced by something else, but that sort of thing. But yes, we rely on it pretty heavily when we do that. As far as the growth situation, that's another zoning and growth is another thing that really is so that we don't have a lot of control over, but it bites us more than we'd like. You see something not on the radar, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, somebody sells a farm and there's another 1,000 homes there 4 years from now. Like, whoa, that wasn't on the radar. And we're seeing more of that than we really like. But, and unfortunately, most of the municipalities, I'm not going to throw the blame, but they don't really have a dog in this fight other than the fact that they pay taxes like everybody else. But sometimes that's not in our best interest where they allow certain size subdivisions go in their jurisdictions, which, y'all have very little control over, and we do as well. But that does kind of hurt us a little bit. Multifamily is starting to really, we know with the growth, as many jobs we got in Cabarrus County, multifamily was inevitable, and we did have a deficit of that, but you're seeing more and more of those, and that's becoming an issue. I know in your land use, I don't think that was quite near as much multifamily as we thought 5 years ago even, that we're seeing today.
But you're seeing the cost increase, especially percentage of the economy, because, I mean, we're looking at the Royal Oaks and the New Southwest, they're fairly similar schools.
Yes,
Yet
sir.
one's extremely more expensive than the other one.
Well, they're not similar schools. One of them's 1.5 times larger than the other. 50% higher, larger. That's the difference. One's built for $650, one's built for $940. So that's a significant increase in
But we're
cost.
still seeing that whatever that $4 million increase was not something that was
Yes,
not a
sir.
design issue, that was
Yeah, construction issue.
things that happened.
Yes,
I
sir.
wanted to,
Square footage wise, cost per square foot, this is probably one of the more expensive schools we've had. It's like $230 per square foot. And that's like, wow, where do we get there? Unfortunately, we're seeing the same thing across the state, though. They're going at $230, $235, $240 right now. So it's in the range of what we see at the other schools being built across the state, so. Gave us some pause when we first saw it, but then,
that's quite a bit higher than what we're accustomed to in years past, as I can remember.
yes, sir.
And I wanted to say this, because I've talked to some of you individually about this, and I've mentioned it one time before, matter of fact, to Dr. Louder just a little while ago, the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, they gave us, the commissioners, a presentation here about a year ago, Steve, talking about back in the early 20s, when the North Carolina state legislation and the schools in the counties, they came together in the 20s, and they had a divisional line between whose responsibility was whose. Well, what they came out of those discussions and meetings was that the state said, okay, we'll supply the teachers and the staff and the operational cost of the schools. And then the counties, you build the schools and provide the maintenance thereof for those schools. Well, what has happened over the years and over the decades, that vision has got considerably more than blurred, because out of our budget right now, because of the state taking money from education, which is where they always state, they always take money from where? Education. It always gets cut. And that's why at one time we were like 49th, ranked 49 in the country as far as where we stood in the country providing that level of education to our students, somewhere around 49. We're doing considerably better than that now. But it's not necessarily because the state has been funding what they were supposed to fund. It's where the counties, like Cabarrus County, has picked up, and we're paying. And Pam, I didn't print this off. You had it. You sent it to us, and I didn't print it off. How much we're spending on schools right now for operational costs, in addition to the debt service. And that's the big problem as far as what I see. Because I've sat on your board, and I'm sitting on this board, and I see now where those lines have been drastically changed. And so when you look where if we were supposed to do the building and continue and keep the maintenance up, and if that's all we did, man, we would be in an excellent shape. We could probably even reduce the tax rate, for that matter goes. But over the course of the years, though, we're paying somewhere around $44,700,000 for operational cost. And then you take in consideration of the debt service. I don't know what our debt service total amount for the county is, what our total debt is. But I know, though, that probably 80 to 85% of our total debt is because of schools, which is, we're mandated for that, and we accept that. But the operational cost is what's killing us, guys. The new positions, the new this, and the new, all the things it takes to make Cabarrus County have the quality education system that it has been and that it needs to continue to be. But we met with our legislators just a couple of weeks ago, and we made them aware of this situation. And so Representative Johnson has told us that there's a committee formed in Raleigh now, and they've been formed for some time, and they're working to go back and revisit the divisional lines between county responsibility and state responsibility, because I think they've lost sight of that, and to the point that it's killing counties, this high growth like Cabarrus County. And I just wanted to tell you that so that you would know, and I'm sure that County Manager Downs can get you the name of our association president, and he can come down. He'd be more than glad to come down and give you the same presentation that he gave us when it comes to the divisional lines between counties and state legislation. Will help you better understand how that it's progressed to where it is now. And, you know, it will just help you understand, and you can see why it's got us in the position that we're in now. So I just wanted to pass that on to you.
Yeah, Mr. Shu, I think we're painfully aware of that, and something our organization, North Carolina School Boards Association, continues to work on is to not have unfunded mandates. And you'll recall that term vividly, I'm sure, where we must provide this service, that service, new curriculum ideas, different classes, limit class size. And so we don't have our own income, so we're dependent on you and appreciate it, so.
As Commissioner Chu, one of the parts of that historical view that they gave us was that there was school bonds, state school bonds that were spread out periodically, and they stopped them. One thing now, it is in front of the legislature right now, is the potential for a school bond, a statewide school bond, and we, our board is supporting that. Hopefully, your board is supporting that. In fact, we hope to bring some legislators from all over the state because they want to use Cabarrus County since we are growing so fast. And not only do we have the need to build more buildings, but to repair some of the older ones that are in place, they want to come in and they want us to bring some legislators in and give them some tours. So we're going to be calling you guys and asking for you to not only give us a tour, but maybe some of the board members join us and have those conversations. If the school bond, the statewide school bond passes, then Cabarrus County will get $37 million in capital money. That would go a long ways to helping us address some of these needs here, your needs. So be on the lookout for that.
Are you aware of a bill that Representative Arp is proposing of a kind of a pay-as-you-go to, number one, get the lottery funding back to the level that it used to over a 10-year period, which is actually competes with the school bond. It's actually going a different direction. And I know he's trying to gain traction on that. I saw him present that at the State Construction Office Convention.
The North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, that's one of their strategic goals, and it has been for quite some time. And it was to try to reinstate some of the funding that was originally a part of the lottery process that has been cut over the years, almost in half, and without any luck so far of getting to put it back. Now it's to at least let us maintain, because we don't want it to keep going down. So yeah, that is.
Well, and his particular bill would not do a state bond, would go the opposite direction to get this. It'd be a pay-as-you-go, so it'd be in conflict with this particular offering that we see out there as the state bond that would get us $37 million. I talked to Representative Arp about it, and I said, well, how would counties like ours get funded off of this? Because he's a representative of Union County, and he really couldn't clearly define how long we would have to wait before we would receive some type of funding out of the pay-as-you-go, because it seemed like there was years 3, 4, and 5 before we would even start seeing a trickle down off of it. So I think it's something we need to investigate further, because I know it's gonna have some traction on a different side of the,
Well, it is encouraging that they're actually having those conversations now.
yeah.
And our local contingency, they support it very much so. So they know we meet with them regularly, our board meets with them regularly. In fact, we had a few of them in this morning. In fact, we had all 4 of them in this morning talking on some other issues. So they are very aware of what's going on here, and they're very supportive of our needs, and they're doing what they can do. But that's good to hear, too.
And if I can get that presentation, I'll try to, I was waiting for the state convention office to download all the presentations. I'll try to send it to you guys once I get it.
And Commissioner Shu, you did refer to a State Association of County Commissioners presentation. I have one here that was produced in December of 17, but you're talking about something earlier than that, apparently. I'm not sure if we have the presentation.
I don't remember when it was. I don't know,
been-
Mr. Chairman, if you remember when it was, or
Been
Mike.
about a year, isn't it?
I'd say,
It's been about a year ago. Kevin Leonard,
Yeah, Kevin Leonard, and I think I'd mentioned this to you one time, other time too, David, that it'd be something really, I mean, he does an excellent job on it. He's not biased or anything. He just shows you the facts, what happened, where we were, where we are, and how we got there. And so I would encourage you to try to get that. And he'll come down in person and do it for you, you know. But I wanted to mention one other thing too, while we were talking about revenues, and that is, if we could get the school bond, that would be a big help to us, 37 million, no doubt. But there's also an issue that we're working on, and I think Senator Newton is working with us on this, and that's on the quarter-cent sales tax flexibility. I don't know how many of you know about that, but that flexibility is, the money right now is designated for transportation, but it would generate upwards of 8 million, I believe that's right, 8 million for that quarter-cent sales tax, if we could get flexibility on that. And see, that would go a long ways also. So it's not like we're not trying to find ways to find revenue, because we are trying to find ways to raise revenue, and we're actively seeking those through legislation and through resolutions supporting these type things. So when the expenses get to the point where that they exceed your revenue, and that's why we're all here. And I, for one, appreciate, because I've been where you are, and I know how hard it is, but I also know now, by being on this side, how hard it is. You know, you got all these different pockets and all these needs in the county, but, you know, if the revenue's not there, we've got the leaders of the community, the big spenders, you guys, got to help us figure out a way to do this. And they've still got time for lots of more discussion, so I want to hear from somebody else besides me.
I just wanted to thank you all for being here and hearing the woes. We get, those are not really your needs, they're our needs, because we're all in this community together. It's coming together and trying to figure out how we're going to deal with it. One of the conversations we had today with the legislators was with your 300 million approximately in the 10-year plan, and then 250 to 300 million in capital maintenance needs. You can't raise taxes enough. When a penny gives you $2.4 million, you can't raise taxes enough to meet the 500, and that's just for your area of schools. So coming together and trying to figure out how we're going to deal with this and where we can give and take, as I think was the purpose of this evening, like I say, because I think you know we're not overflowing with money, or a lot of your needs would already be taken care of. So how we can work together and figure out, is there something we can slow down, and I don't know how you do that, because you're going to be overflowing, and you can't control the growth, and we can't control the growth. So somehow together we have to figure out how to deal with it, and although I'm grateful that we have it, it brings its challenges. And so we've been very fortunate from an economic development perspective. You know, we've gotten tax revenues off of $800 million that have come in since 2014. So if we didn't have that, we really would be in a world of hurt, you know, and we hope to continue that, but I don't think at this point we can't keep up, you know, through those means. So anyway, just thank you for being here and for helping us try to figure out how we're going to proceed together. Because we do realize you're coming to ask for it, but the growth is not your, you didn't cause the growth, you just have to deal with it along with us, so.
Lynn, what you had mentioned So are you telling me at this point then that quarter of sales tax is up for renewal now, basically? That quarter is up for renewal now?
No, we're currently getting that 1/4% if I'm,
No. We have the capacity to go one more quarter cent.
okay.
However, right now, that quarter cent on the state level is only available for transportation. What our board is talking about is advocating to give us flexibility to use it for education or debt service for education as well. Right now, it's restricted only to transportation.
And that's if we got it.
That's if you get,
If we
either
got it.
way, even if the board was given, if they changed it, if they changed the legislation and allowed us to use it for, it would still have to be a referendum. It would still have to go to the public to approve it, but at least it's an option to allow us to move forward to ask for that ability to use, to raise the sales tax.
So you're just asking for a referendum to change it for flexibility then?
We're asking the legislature to give us that flexibility, which will then give the board the ability, if they so chose, to call for a referendum
Oh, okay.
locally.
And although our citizens would pay that, there would be a lot of out-of-towners contributing to that. That would really help get to that 8 million.
Well, that's one of our advantages that we have. We have the #1 tourist attraction in the state, which brings those dollars in. The comment I want to make, Lynn, Blake, I agree with you 100%. When you talk about your comments you made, we do look at the construction cost, and I agree with your comments that you made. One of the things that I want to make sure that we are doing, and I wanted to ask Tim to make sure we're doing, we value engineer every project that we bring in. And I want to make sure that we are cross-referenced. Do we recheck when we have value engineered these things to see if we have seen things that have resurfaced on all these these projects? Do we recheck that to see if we're seeing the same thing kind of resurface on these things, Tim?
Not necessarily the same things, because right now, the last 3 or 4 schools, they're all different. So each one of them has a different set of VE items that we can take in control of. Like the high school, there's a totally different set of things on that high school that we could value engineer versus an elementary school. They don't have ball fields, they don't have stadiums, they don't have things like that, lighting and stuff that you can help VE down into the project at an elementary school level. But we do look at things like, sidewalk widths and access and storage lanes and all those sort of things on site that we can try to, you like to have, one of your pet things is to make sure we have plenty of on-site stacking, and there's a minimum requirement from the state. We try to exceed that simply because we are on state roads most of the time, and we do have a tendency to have people back out onto the roads that they don't like very much. So we try to always exceed that a little bit, but then we have to be balancing how far do we exceed that. Can we value engineer that back to just one lane of storage for a certain distance in order to minimize our costs, because those are pretty expensive items, stuff like that. And the materials, what type of materials are we using? Are we using materials that are the most economical at the time? I mean, that changes depending on the availability and labor force and that sort of thing too, is how they're installed. So it's very, very tough to keep that balance, because I say the high school's got 3 different construction methods. We've got structural masonry, we've got structural steel, and we've got precast. So we try to use a balance of all 3 to try to make sure that one particular segment of the construction industry didn't dominate the cost of our school. And it also gave us a little more competition too about the material suppliers. But then when you get to a middle elementary school, we have a couple choices, either structural masonry or structural steel. Structural masonry at one time was what we used almost exclusively for our elementary schools. Almost everything was single-story structural masonry. When you go to multi-story, structural masonry doesn't work real well for the classroom wings. You have to go almost with structural steel in order to make that economical to go up 3 or 4 floors to support the loads. But you still can use some of it on the first floor for some of the common areas. So it's a tough balance, but we are constantly looking at ways to design the school with VE in mind, how we get the best bang for our buck at the time. And like I said, we use a lot of sheetrock that we didn't used to use. We use a lot of floor tile and stuff like that we try to do. I mean, used to, schools were all built with terrazzo floors. My goodness, we'd love to have terrazzo floors in the last 50 years, but who can afford terrazzo floors now? So, you know, that's just things you can't do. We tried to polish concrete route, but once you go to multi-level, polishing the concrete at a second and third story just doesn't work well because you have cracking. Concrete will get hard and it will crack, and if you just do nothing but polish those floors on the second level, they will have cracks in them. And if you can't live with cracks, then you can't do that. So we have to go back to tile. So, you know, those are things we always try to weigh against. How can we get back? Even though on the front end might be just a little more expensive, but longer term it might be better maintenance. It's a tough balance. But unfortunately, most time in VE, we have to go back to the tried and true, or we have to go back to VCT because that's the most economical for to install at the beginning, but even over time, it does cost you more money.
But we do work to do that, and we'll keep trying, and I think maybe even reviewing the book you talked about, that may be something we need to do, but we'll take any suggestions. We are open, but that is something we've worked very hard on when you were on the board. But I know all our board members were very concerned with that.
Anybody else have anything to add?
I guess I'll add my part. And again, as sitting on the board for the last 6 years here, I'm very appreciative. Every year we ask for more, and every year you've tried to work hard to make sure that we've increased our budget and met our continuation. So what I'm seeing here is that you're again, this year trying to help us hit our continuation budget. Is that correct? So it looks like we're going to hit it. We're going to be able to continue to serve the students in the same capacity as we have been. That's very much appreciated. I just wanted to make sure I was reading that correctly. So, thank you.
I think that you probably formed an opinion that we were calling you in here tonight to give you some sort of devastating news, which is not the case at all. It's more of an attempt to create an overall understanding amongst all of us as to the hurdles that we've got to figure out how to get over. Just to add to a couple things that have been said, the flexibility on the quarter-cent sales tax, that's something that I feel optimistic that we're going to be able to accomplish that. We've been having those conversations with folks at the state level for about a year and a half, perhaps a little bit longer than that. They're very receptive to it. The state school bond, and of course I know there are other plans out there, but that also is sounding very encouraging. But both of those items are items that will have to be approved by the voters. So I think it's important for the commissioners and the school board to both have a mutual understanding and be on the same page on those, because they're going to depend on us, the public's going to depend on us to offer those explanations. And I think Carolyn makes a very good point, that that's one of the great benefits that we have here in Cabarrus County. When we have those sales tax increases, a big chunk of that is coming from people that come over to Cabarrus County to shop. They don't have kids in our schools. They don't use other services, but they help us to pay those bills. And I think if we can explain that to taxpayers, along with the state bond for capital construction as well, that goes a long way to get those things passed, especially when we explain that we have just a couple sources of revenue. One of them is this sales tax that we can get a lot of help paying that. The alternative is property taxes, which come directly out of our citizens' pockets. So I think we've got a good story to tell. And as we progress further along in that, I think especially with both boards being supportive and being on the same page with that, it helps to educate taxpayers, and I think it makes them feel comfortable to pass those things. So I think that's something we really need to work together on as we go forward.
Just to repeat the obvious, I'll be the stuck record here. This comment goes back long before many of y'all were on the county commission, but the county commission historically has been very good to the school system in this county. And I've always been more than impressed, more than astonished at the commission's ability to not have a partnership so much as a stewardship of county resources and to provide as much as you reasonably can for the schools. And for that, I am deeply grateful and hope to see that. I know that that partnership will continue.
Thank you, appreciate those comments. The other thing that,
I wish I were buttering you up.
yeah, well, the other part of this that I think is always important to point out, everything that we're looking at and talking about tonight is what I call crystal ball work. You know, we're constantly trying to predict the future, trying to predict what the growth's gonna be, where the growth's gonna be. You're predicting growth of students, we're predicting growth of revenues, so it is not an exact science. And so what we feel comfortable, you know, we may be over projecting on some things. We may be under projecting on some things. So it's, you know, my hat's off to our finance people and budget people. They have a very strong talent to help us. They have a better crystal ball than I've got. But a lot of that is, you know, we don't like surprises, and they do a very good job of helping us project out to try to avoid some of those surprises. And so I think for us all to sit down and talk about that together is a real benefit to us. And quite honestly, I think we were expecting some harder questions than what we've heard so far.
Yeah. Well, just to add to that, as the boards are relating to each other on a regular, the staff, I can tell you that the staff is working together better than we have worked in my 32 years of being here. Dr. Louder and I meet individually together regularly, and then the staff person around this table, we meet monthly as well. So I tell you, we're trying to figure this out, and we keep pushing, and sooner or later, we're gonna get this thing. But we're looking at how, we gotta keep costs down. If we can spread this out a little bit, that would help tremendously. And then the only other option we have is raise revenues, and then we've talked about, Commissioner Morris talked about a few more, and then we've even explored more. And again, these buildings that we're building are 50-year buildings, but we have to pay them off in 20 years. We're trying to advocate to extend that out to 30 years so we can spread to lower those payments down a little bit. Because right now, you know, there's an argument out there that, you know, these are cross-generational buildings, but one generation's paying for them. So is that right or wrong? I don't know. It's a good argument either way. So we're looking at that. We're a Tier 3 county, so any of these grants, these operational grants, construction grants, we don't get them because we don't qualify because we're considered a wealthy county. It doesn't matter that a good portion of our county is not a wealthy county or the towns, and so we're trying our hardest to do that. Our board, our staff, I think you have maybe individually, we're advocating for less residential growth or slow it down, just like we want to slow the construction down, let's slow it down. And I think the cities have responded somewhat in a positive way, but they're getting pressures too. And, you know, and they've got a lot of utilities in the ground that they need to pay for. So we're meeting with the cities regularly as well. So please understand from the staff's perspective and the staff level, we're out there beating the bushes all we can, and we're trying to bring those potential solutions up to you, and we appreciate from the staff level that you meeting and talking about this, because it's a positive. It gives us some direction to go back out and say, okay, maybe we need to sharpen our pencils, maybe we need to sharpen our brains a little bit and see if there's a way to solve this puzzle. But it's tough. Yeah. But as long as we all understand that it's tough from both perspectives, that maybe we can continue to try to find some more solutions.
I might add to that, you know, Mike said working with the cities, and I sound maybe I was bashing cities a little bit ago. I wasn't. It's just that they are being more responsive. They do invite us to all the, you know, every time someone files for a subdivision, they invite us to comment on that and give our recommendations. So we really appreciate that, and sometimes it's helped, you know, by saying, you know, this is really pretty dense. It's really going to cause us an issue in this sector or this district or whatever. And so we do appreciate that, you know, that cooperation back and forth with the county and the city starting to actually realize that, boy, you know, that 500 lots really may have a major impact on a school that's already overcrowded and that sort of thing, and give us a chance to at least comment on that during the review stage. So. It's been good.
Well,
Okay.
we could say that state school bond could purchase land for new middle school, 2 high schools, and 1 downtown elementary school. That would pay for, that's what it could pay for. Adding those dollars up, didn't you say 36 million? That would be $36 million. So that's
Well-
what it could pay for.
I don't think we're gonna have a problem coming up with a list of,
Yeah, we wouldn't have a problem, but that's 36 million
I
right there.
think we can probably take care of
That's with the
that.
1 to 5 year plan, but anyway, that's
Yeah.
36 million.
Well, and you do mention an important point, and this is something that we've talked about a lot, is land banking, which we've talked about it more than we have done it, but it is becoming increasingly more difficult to find suitable pieces of property for the schools, and I think someone, it may have been Tim, that pointed out just recently, we spend a lot of time talking about the extreme expense that we go to with poor soils and grading expenses, et cetera, et cetera. It's because we're not able to buy the prime tracts of land in the county, in the areas that we want them. So that's certainly something that we've been looking at as well. I think cooperatively between the two boards, trying to identify those future areas and try to identify property that we might need in the future. So far, I think with no exception, we've built on every piece we've bought just as quick as we got it. So we haven't quite got there yet, but that's still in the plan. Of course, our concern is about the needs here in Cabarrus County, what we have to do. But sometime if it becomes a little overwhelming, which it does for me, for sure, it's always good to get out and about and hear what other folks have to say. We had a district commission, our association meeting in Yadkin County a couple weeks ago, and each county there kind of reports out on what's going on in their county, and so I got up and reported for Cabarrus County, and I said, these are the projects that we're currently involved in, and named them with the price tags with them. And you would not believe the open mouths in that room and the people that afterwards came up and said, we cannot believe that what you guys are undertaking at one time. I don't say that in a boastful way at all, because the part that felt good about it was when you hear some of the other counties report out and they say, well, they closed our hospital last year, and so now we're trying to deal with the extra expense of having our EMS folks transport patients to a hospital an hour away or an hour and a half away, those kind of things. And we're trying to figure out how we can repurpose that empty hospital building. We're losing students in our school system, but we're still trying to figure out how to replace some of the aging facilities, and it goes on and on. So when you look at the problems that some other areas have, I say, well, this growth is really hard, but I would rather have those kind of problems than the problems of shrinking and losing things. So we're lucky to be in a great place, and we're lucky to have some of these challenges that we're trying to meet, and we appreciate everybody sitting down at the table together to talk about it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I want to elaborate just for a minute on the county manager. You said we started the budget process, 15 million in a deficit.
Yes, sir.
And we have asked our departments, and we have asked our different entities that ask for us for money to go back to the drawing board and come back to us with what you absolutely have to have. And they're doing that. We've cut the need down. So we're just a little over $5 million deficit right now. So what I want to do is I want to reach out and challenge the school board to look at your operational cost. And if I can get Susan or Pam or somebody to get this document to the school board, for them to look at this and say, wow, what can we do to reduce the county's operational expense? And I would like to ask the school board to participate in that 5.2 million deficit that we're looking at by reviewing your operational cost and tell us what you can do and how you can do your part to help us bring this deficit down. Now, it hasn't been said, or just briefly touched on just for a little bit, and that's raising revenues. I think every one of us sitting in this room that has the knowledge of what's going on in Cabarrus County would probably say, like a lot of people have told me, I don't know how Cabarrus County has maintained the current tax rate for 7 years. Well, there's a lot of things in play to make that happen. Some magic. Is it 6 years?
6 years, yes.
6 years.
That was my fault. I said it first, so.
Well,
sorry
there's a
about
lot
that.
of, it's really some real magic going on there. How they make it work, I don't know. But I do know, and I think everybody would be lack of understanding if you didn't know that a tax increase is more than likely coming at some point. Because 2019 looks a whole lot worse than 2018 does. And so that's where the big deficit is then. But anyway, I want to issue that challenge out. And, you know, your board meets and you have your discussions and you look at the operational expenses that we're paying and see what you can do without some of these things and help us with this deficit that we're working with for this year. And I think there needs to be some discussion at some point. Maybe the committee that's put together by the state will help, not just for Cabarrus County, but for North Carolina as well, to help better define the lines of responsibility and bring that back into the vision that it was during inception in the 20s. We're not living in the 20s, obviously. And we're 100 years later. And things are a lot different now than they were then. Everybody knows that. But then again, though, the vision was, this is yours and this is ours. But, you know, that's where I'm at. We're going to have to look at this because it just cannot keep going like it's going, in my opinion. It can't continue to be going like this, especially with the need for schools. With the school demand being like it is, to find seats for the kids, you know, you face the operational cost as well. It just makes it a lot harder for us. But anyway, there's the challenge, and I hope that you're up for it, and we'll be hearing some good news from you guys real soon on this. Because, you know, we have to adopt our budget by June the 30th, and I think we have it scheduled, if I'm not mistaken, for our general meeting in June. Is that right,
Yes, sir.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
And so we need to get busy on this and try to bring this the rest of the way down. And then we'll have to cover next year as we get to it. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And looking at our agenda, we got down to the what next section. Do you think we've covered all those?
Mr. Shue, we're emailing that to Eileen so she can send it out to the board. We're emailing that to Eileen right now so she can send it out.
Mike, you think we've?
I think we've had some good discussion. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yeah.
Probably all of you school board members are better educated about this than me, and I'm not a great mathematician, but in looking over the school system numbers from 1990 to 2019, and I don't think there's anything magical about that time frame, but my math says that we've had 169% increase in the number of students. 1990, 12,296 students. 2019, 33,117 students. So that was pretty eye-opening to me to actually see that written down on paper. But we've certainly discussed the challenges that come along with that. So now I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Chairman Furtenbaugh, to conduct your business.
Are we finished with everything else? Because y'all don't have to stay for our part, unless you want to.
Well, we have one issue that we want to talk about, and that's the mobile classrooms. Susan, you want to talk about that? or Kelly, I'm not sure which one of you want to.
Kelly addressed me about 2 weeks ago, and there's a need to go ahead and order the mobile units and not wait until the debt financing. However, we did not do a reimbursement resolution, so I do not have that in my budget for you to be able to pre-audit, but unless you do your pre-audit subject to funding approval, that's where we are now. We do that periodically when we did the elementary school. We'll go ahead and do a resolution to our board to approve for reimbursement, but we did not do that for the mobile units. So, but the funding, all anticipated, will be here May 16th.
May 16th. I wrote that date down, and so we did some work with Chuck today. We are hopeful that there's a used eightplex that we're looking at. If we can get that used eightplex, we're okay with that time frame. Will be good. If we have to do the new one and go out to bid and do that, we're all in trouble. So let's just cross our fingers and hope that, because we can't get that one till September right now. So let's hope that the used one will work out.
And what school that be for?
The eightplex, where are they? Weddington.
What we intend to do there is put the eightplex at Weddington and then take those, 5 of those classrooms and relocate them somewhere else within the system to help meet that, teacher growth demand. So that's what we're trying to do.
I would say, with your debt schedule being that close, and we can't get the new one anyway by that time frame, your time frame is gonna be okay. We're just gonna have to deal with it. We are.
In previous discussions that we talked about a mobile classroom being about $50,000. And if I'm not mistaken, this 20 units comes out to about $44,000. No?
No,
It's the
it's more
principal
like
plus
100.
the interest?
No, it's more like 100,000 per unit. By the time you buy the unit, you set it up.
Oh,
You
all right. Okay.
have furniture, you have technology, you have possible water lines, possible electrical service, all of those things. It gets underpinning, decking. It gets expensive.
So a mobile classroom costs about as much as a bus.
Yes, sir.
Okay, anything else? Then I would entertain a motion that the Board of Commissioners meeting be adjourned. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. And we stand adjourned.
And thank you all for having us. And now we're going to discuss spending some of the money you've already told us.